Now we have people online. Great. Hello, everyone online. And so this really talks through like what is being produced in terms of like types of data and data management plan sharing and SMART goals, and then how is it being standardized, what does access look like, licensing, user interfaces, et cetera. So this is a really great resource, and again, the link to the Miro board is in the notes if you want to go poke around in there. So we tried to take a lot of this and then figure out how do we actually build something that is an accessible resource for the community. So that's where we are now. We had a small working group. Again, the sort of 5 of us have been meeting about once a week for the last couple of months since the January meeting to really try to convert some of this into a usable resource for the community. We originally started with this concept of, okay, we wanted to build agency templates and DMP tool, to we want to provide the agencies with guidance, to we just want to give the community examples of what a good DMP looks like. And that's partly because, as you might have heard, the landscape has changed really rapidly in the last couple of months at the federal level. And so instead of trying to keep up with all the changes that are happening on the agency side of things, instead we thought, why don't we just take data management plans that were funded and take snapshots of those that represent what the best practices were that we crowdsourced in March from the community. Okay, so that's kind of how we got to where we are. I'm going to now hand it off to Boulevard to kind of walk through it. And first of all, a big shout out to Aaron in the back for helping us get this up on the ESIP GitHub site. And so they're actually hosting it, which is awesome. Okay, so stop. And then I can make this go away again. Oop. Okay, go for it, Boulevard.
So thank you, Alicia. Yeah, so kind of how Alicia has talked, our ideas evolved into what this resource could be, from thinking of this is going to be how you do it, to hey, this is how successful examples have done it. And this was a little bit inspired in the Biological Data Standards group, primer guide, and for me at least, a little bit on the work that OpenScapes has done and kind of how to build an online resource that folks can just really go back to and use as a reference over and over as they write DMPs through their careers. So, like Alicia said, and Aaron at ESIP helped us set it up on GitHub. So after I kind of leave and maybe the cluster dissolves or doesn't, or how things evolve, that could be sustained over as an open source resource. But basically, it has just 3 main sections, right? An introduction where we present and welcome folks to the resource, which is this main page that we're at. An overview of the data lifecycle, and we're trying to not duplicate efforts. There's many good resources to use to develop your DMPs. So we've used here kind of this data lifecycle graph that the RDM kit from Elixir Europe uses, and it links to them. Actually, we need to make those turn into their own tabs, but yeah. So it takes you to other resources, and we're trying to really intertwine the resources that are out there with this primer. And then your kind of general, hey, this is how you're going to use it. This is how you can use it. And explain a little bit our intention with this resource. And then you go to your DMP content section, and you have kind of very broad topics of like, okay, what are going to be my research outputs? Am I going to produce a paper, a publication? Are we producing models? Are we producing big, samples? Are we producing software? So by the research output, we sort of touch on, hey, models, where are we talking about statistical, mathematical, computational models? And then, for example, Bianchi et al. Wrote it or worded it in this way. So we've created these call-out boxes to highlight how successful DMPs have worded that. So it's not necessarily a cookbook, right? As in like, hey, write exactly this wording, but to see a successful example of that. I think where this really stands out is, for example, in talking about the types of data and the sizes of your data. Well, you could say, yes, we're going to produce 10 gigabytes of data. Well, what type of data? What format? Are we talking about CSV? Are we talking about JSON files? Are we talking about Parquet files, etc.? The agencies might be different, but here we have some examples where they've worded that decently, where they say, we have about 60 terabytes of data. This is going to be in physical premises. A certain amount is going to be on the cloud, etc. And then we've added a little bit of this is us reviewing the DMPs, and what we saw as a gap in the resources out there is like, well, you could read a DMP, but is that a good DMP? And the indicator is, was it funded or not funded? But some funded projects have lackluster DMPs, and you're like, well, how did that get through? But here we've just added, and we're really trying to put our comments on like, hey, this is how they worded it, but they miss X, Y, or Z, or this is why this one is actually good, right? That they really put those out, are really specific. So basically, you're gonna go through your DMP kind of content and change through your standardization and data, and then you have tables of context and contents in the left, and then to these resources. And I think this section will probably be building even more on is the references, or other resources that we're trying to compile. So this can be a little bit of a one-stop for people to come and be like, okay, here I go to this other, this is how NOAA does it, this is how NASA does it, and this is the resources that are out there for me to use. So we have a works cited of the DMPs that we've used as an example, so you can go ahead and access those and read those. We're running into the kind of conundrum of how do we cite a DMP? So by the project name and the live URL, or if it has a DOI attached to it. If it wasn't done through the DMP tool, it might not have a DOI. So this is a working, this is a work in progress of how we cite these, but I think this is pretty good. And then just other resources here with a little bit of an explanation of like what they're for, that folks can start using. Yeah, and then there's many acronyms and all these things, so in all our agencies, and a dictionary of other agreed terms that we're probably going to be adding. So this is the main resource that we want to discuss with you all today, hear back from you of what would you like to see, what user experience would you like to have with this kind of again, it's kind of a primer, a resource to kind of stop and think of where you're going to take your data management plan and see examples that inspire you to write a good data management plan. Yeah, thank you.
Does anybody have any initial questions? Yes, thanks, Boulevard. How many of you in here have written a data management plan before? It's a few hands. How many of you in here are planning to write a data management plan but haven't done one yet? Few people, okay. How many of you in here review data management plans? Yes. Okay, good, awesome. We have a nice little spectrum. So the goal, again, and thanks, Primer, Bolivar, for walking for the primer, is to really make something that's going to be useful to the community. And so we would love your feedback from the perspective of someone who's never written a data management plan. Is this accessible? Is there information that's missing? What else would you like to see in here for examples? For people that have written a data management plan, is this aligning with how you think about data management plans? Is there something that you discovered that we're missing that you think could be added to this that would be helpful? And for those that review data management plans, make sure that we're following best practices that you're familiar with, any lessons learned about how you've worked with your community, barriers that we maybe not have captured documentation on that you often see people running into. Those would all be great feedback for this. Okay, so most of this session is actually designed as kind of a small group breakout, and so that's what we'll do next. This QR code should take you to a feedback form, which is just a Google form. It's split out into a couple of different sections, and I'll kind of walk through it here in a second once people get the link up. There's basically a section that kind of gets feedback on the intro pages that Bolivar introduced. Then there's a section that gets feedback on the DMP content pages, and then there's kind of a catch-all resources. And none of the questions are required, so you can kind of jump back and forth between them as you think of stuff. Again, the idea is to break you out into small groups so you can kind of crowdsource some feedback and have one person just fill out the Google form. It should be anonymous. I think it's set up that way, so feel free to be brutally honest. That's totally fine. Submit as many as you need to capture the feedback that you need. And I think we'll probably take, we'll start with 20 minutes, and if people are still going, we can extend it. We've got lots of time. And again, the goal is to make this a resource people are actually going to use, right? Help us make it something that you would actually go to and say, oh, I need to write a data management plan, but I forgot kind of what I need to put in for software, for example. Or, oh, I have people that are going to be submitting data management plans. Can I send them something for them to look at ahead of time to say, okay, how do I review a data management plan? Is this useful for that? So we would definitely like all of those use cases to be addressed with this if possible. Okay, does everybody have the form open that needs it? I can come back to that slide in a second too and leave it up. Okay, so again, it should just be a very general form. So there's a section on the intro pages. So spend some time reading through it, make sure that it makes sense. Then there'll be some sections on the data lifecycle page, the feedback page, etc. And this is partly where when we talk about the feedback page here, I think it's fair to say does this make sense? Is this accessible to most people? Are people terrified of GitHub? It's fairly easy entry, the issue side of things, but we'll come back to that. So definitely feedback on whether that's accessible or not would be helpful too. We talked about playing some elevator music or smooth jazz or something, so we can figure out how to do that if you want. But please get into a couple of small groups. We're gonna wander around. We're happy to answer any questions. And yeah, we appreciate any input you have. Is it just one person?
Yeah, I just meant, so I created a breakout, but I don't know if it's necessary. I can pop in there and go in the hallway.
Yeah, maybe just go in the hallway and get some feedback from Carl. That'd be great. Okay. Okay, yeah, so meet your neighbor. If you already know your neighbor and you want to go meet somebody else, use this as an example. I'm looking at the back room because I know those three all know each other. And I'll leave this slide up in case anybody needs the Google slide code again.
Yeah, and I forgot, right now, the sort of very agency focus where you will see, hey, this is a NASA.
Oh, yeah. Thanks.
This is a NASA or a NOAA or a USGS or BICO demo at Sample. But feel free to, if we need themes, if we need other topics or a more generalist approach or specialist, so that is greatly welcome.
Yeah, and well, thanks for reminding me of that. So we have this like ESIP relevant data management plan sources. These are just the people, the groups that responded when we asked and were very interactive with us as we built this out. So you'll notice there's a lot of oceanography ones in there. That also helps that I used to work with the BCO people a lot, so I could poke them. But this is a chance to say like, oh, I don't see my agency's not there, my data management plan's not there. And so we have worked with quite a few other agencies. We just need a little bit more input from people from the ESIP community about what you need from them, and then we can work with them to put in some more examples. So I assume not everyone in here is an oceanography, right? Okay, great.
So if you are, like I'm with NOAA, and we have several different DMP tools and several different templates that we use. So you should really be protecting, but okay, good. So how do you want us to approach this then? If we already have the tool, if we already have like a template, do you want us to look through this? And I'm assuming not all of the fields that we have are relevant for the rest of ESIP. So how do you want us to approach this, basically?
Yeah, so for the earlier part of the question, NOAA has a bunch of templates already. And again, we're not trying to replicate the template, but if there are components in here that you see reflected in the template and you have examples that would be a good example of a best practice that went into a NOAA DMP that we can like snapshot and credit the author, we will add it to the resource. So we would love to crowdsource additional examples of language that was put in to a NOAA grant or a USG grant. And they're like, this is how USGS talks about samples. This is how NOAA talks about instruments. We want those because then we can add them and broaden the kind of examples that are available to people. And then if somebody's applying for a NOAA thing, you could say, hey, go check out this resource. It has some nice language that has worked for previous NOAA grants. Okay. Oh, okay. I just feel like it's like. Okay. Hello, everybody. I am going to turn the video on, and we'll hope that the online people are back. Move the chat. Okay. How was everybody's chats? Seems like there were some good conversations that were happening. I think we'll do a little bit of group discussion, but one thing that came up a couple of times that I wanted to talk about is like, where is this going? Like, what does this look like in the future? And so I wanted to kind of give everybody a little bit of an understanding of kind of where I think the land of data management plans is headed. So DMP tool is run by the California Digital Library. Many of the agencies have templates there. They are moving towards this concept of a machine actionable DMP, which basically means they are hoping to have some back-end infrastructure available for the data management plan that can make it a living document. So the goal for the DMP is to eventually get to a point where you're not just turning it in with your proposal and never thinking about it again, to the comments that we had back there, because things change, but you're actually able to go in and update it and link research outputs to it that you've generated. So if you have a GitHub repo or a dataset DOI, or you've submitted a model to Zenodo, you can actually go back to your data management plan, link those persistent identifiers, those DOIs or those web links, and the machine actionability will actually see those, right? And the relationships between the DOI that you have for your DMP is now linked to the DOI that you have for your data set. And the funders can say, hey, give me all of the research outputs for this data management plan DOI, and suddenly get a list of everything that was actually generated by that funded project. And so the data management plan then morphs into this like data management guide of everything that was actually generated. So in an ideal world, that's, I think, where this is headed. And so as we were going through the resource, we have talked to DMP Tool, there's a Research Data Alliance group that's putting out common standards, which acts on the back end again of that machine actionability. And if you go to the DMP content, you will actually see this DMP common standard here, and that is standardized language behind the DMP of like, this is what a data set is. And you can thank Carolina for this because she went through and did the mapping for all of these because she's a very good data manager. And so, and her OCD had to, like, it had to happen. So we're like, okay, you please make it so. So built into all of these sections is this concept of a common standard, which then would make those sections machine actionable. And eventually we'll get to the point, right, where if you actually have agents that go through your proposal narrative, they might actually be able to start populating a DMP for you by the actual narrative of your proposal, right? And so you can start to say, okay, this is a data set you talked about. You should talk about that in your DMP. Or these are code that you've talked about. You should make sure to have a section in your DMP on that. So getting to a point where it's a little bit more iterative and where it's a little bit less manual repeat every time you have to build one of these. Okay, so that gives it a little bit more context. Rachel, was there something else that came up that you thought we should cover? Okay. Carolina Bolivar, anything else from your meanderings that we should chat with the whole group about?
Oh, it's just some suggestions about different data types, like, yeah, if you want to,
So what I had mentioned to Carolina is I work in the oceanography field, so this was very helpful with all the oceanography pieces. But I had come into the situation where I applied for a grant with the New Jersey Sea Grant, and it was about the wind farms and like how you can start doing science in the areas that they're proposing. But they had a recommended DMP format, so they had different sections. So one of my comments is like those sections don't necessarily line up with these sections, so that's kind of hard to look at and try to like almost map yourself. And then the second one is, in this case, we're looking at eDNA. So that's still kind of new in the oceanography field. So it's kind of trying to compare like the eDNA NIH standards versus collecting on a ship where you have to freeze it for 10 days or so, and then where you're gonna put that data and how you make it accessible and open source. So it's kind of hopeful and interested in seeing with different examples that's a little not ocean related, but we can kind of compare apples to tomatoes a little bit and kind of work together. Because I do like some of these like oceanography specific ones are really helpful.
Yeah, and I do think like NOAA, I think just released their eDNA, right? And so I think they'll have some good examples coming online about eDNA. So I think that would be interesting. One thing that we had talked about, that Bolivar mentioned is, do we want kind of domain specific sections, right? So maybe there's an earth science section, maybe there's an oceanography section, an atmospheric section. So that's something that we could definitely consider as a kind of a clearinghouse for things that are more specific to those particular topics.
I think doing something like that would make it easier to, at a glance, like quickly look for your field, or at least the field that you're trying to write a proposal for, versus like trying to slog through the whole thing and, okay, I got a little piece from this one, and I got a little piece from this one, and I put it together and it kind of makes sense, but I need to review it a few more times.
Good feedback, thanks. Does anybody else want to share ideas that came up?
Like DMPs I find them confusing. It feels like there's a bit of conflation around like, is it a planning artifact, or like the concept of it is a living document. I'm like, whoa, that seems like a big direction to put it in. And also, where is that then hosted and managed? And how is it? Because the second it's a living document, it's like now, okay, there's something, you need infrastructure, and who's doing that? And is this then across the entirety of ESIP and an even broader research community? We're talking about some kind of like database that's like managing life cycle infrastructure of DMPs. Like that seems, It's like if we're going to do that, then that should be broader than DMPs. That should be like thinking about research objects in the broadest sense or something.
Yeah, I think it's still an open question. I think DMP tool is going to move to support some of that. But again, as conversation came up, it's like machine actionability has been on the DMP roadmap for a while. They are actively working on it at the moment, but their staff is fairly small, and we'll see what ends up happening. But that's kind of the idea of where it would go. Other thoughts? Thanks.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the pros and cons of, kind of this format of things. So Samantha had brought up some really good points too of making it really clear what the value is for having a really good DMP and why you want to follow all of these and what that means for you. And then, we had talked about some other discussions of the funding agencies not really checking up on things, and you kind of write it and then, it just goes into the wherever of the internet. Yeah. And I know some funding agencies are interested in putting it into their annual reports or other things that you then have to report against the DMP, which I think this would then be, extra useful of then how do you kind of report progress and things, which I think would be really cool. But yeah, I think Samantha saying of just why is it so great to have this, and then what's the benefit of getting a DOI, of who's going to be citing that and why and what is that value, so that it's not just a DOI for the sake of getting a DOI for something. And then we talked about how this is a really nice resource to get to the people early in the process. So if you could have back links, so you have nice links to the resources on the funding agency sites, but I don't know if it's possible for other places to link to this resource of here's more information here are examples or other things that could maybe just cross promote with other, just to get it in front of people sooner the better, because this is a really nice collection of resources. We thought it would just be nice to get some good visibility early in the process.
We were talking earlier in our little group about the difficulty of the current incentives and the historic lack of follow-up for whether it's entire agencies or divisions within agencies in terms of the uneven expectations or weight given to DMPs and actually following through on them. That remains a challenge, but that's a slowly evolving landscape. The good news is, I think part of it is agencies like the National Science Foundation, for example, have not historically had the capacity administratively to effectively track compliance with DMPs. And so they have, been reliant on what might be included in annual reports, but that's small fish to fry compared to what are typically the other gold standard elements and the things that they can automate the collection of. Just in the last year and a half, 2 years, NSF has been now ramping up the required use of a data reporting component for their online reporting system that has been in place for a long time for adding your project's publications as a way to automate the process of capturing in a structured way the products coming out of their funded projects. And with tools like that in place, then those administrative limitations are relaxed somewhat. So, and those are strategies that are likely to accelerate in their use in terms of increasing the accountability for actually doing something that resembles compliance with the data management plan, actually using machine actionable data management plans, and we've heard some whispers about that from some of the agencies, but they're still focused on the narratives as that's what the review panels are given as a part of the reviews. But yeah, with that machine actionability, then there are actually mile markers that can be placed in the ground that can be combined with those reporting systems to track actual progress. And then hopefully being able to mine systems like the repositories that should be able to capture funder information in conjunction with the materials being deposited into those systems and being able to, track it by award ID and things like that, that can help as well. But yeah, the ecosystem is still evolving, but it's, I think, accelerating towards being able to more effectively mine and present and hopefully track progress towards proposed goals. Because to date, it's been, we'll do it if we want to, but often it's too little, too late, because it's not a priority in terms of the limited resources that projects have. And when it's a choice between funding a grad student, writing another publication, or curating a data set to go into a repository, which is going to provide the greatest return when it comes to promotion and tenure, the success of your next grant proposal, getting your students graduated and into new jobs. Unfortunately, data remains a second-class citizen when it comes to those.
I will not go on my soapbox about that right now. But yes, those are good points. And so I think one takeaway would be making sure that we have a section that describes, what are the benefits, but then also like letting people know eventually what's coming in terms of like what are the expectations that your funders are going to have that are maybe going to evolve, that will maybe have a little bit more accountability built into it. Anyone online? No, nice and quiet online? Okay. Hybrid meetings are always hard, so I feel bad that we ignore the online people, but they are not responding, so it's fine. Okay, any other thoughts from anyone? This is all really good feedback, so. Okay, so we'll kind of move on to the next part of this. Okay. Okay, so we talked about sort of overall impressions and sort of key takeaways already. I wanted to reload this. Okay, put it on the, okay, it did come up. Cool. The next part of this, we wanted to kind of go through what are the obvious next steps. And so the working group is around for another couple of months. Nominally, I decided the next 2 months. I don't really know if that's true or not. But we will be handing this off to the next Data Stewardship Committee Chair. Bolivar and I are going to meet with her tomorrow morning to kind of figure out kind of what her plans are for the committee. But she was very interested in this, that she's running a session, so she couldn't come. So immediate actions that can be done by the working group over the next couple of months. We would like to know what we should prioritize, and so we would value your input on that. Any next steps that seem like longer term things that we should make sure that get on the record as things that should happen, and then nice to haves or feature requests, things that can be like longer term down the road as this infrastructure around machine actionability and funders, expectations, etc., continue to evolve. So the plan for this community longer term, we would like this resource to continue to be of value. So ideas around how to make sure that it's sustainable. Again, we want to crowdsource additional examples. Maybe we want to build out sort of domain-specific template type structures so that people can say, go in and say, I'm an oceanographer, what do I need to cover? I am a geologist, what do I want to make sure to cover? So we can do things like that. And so the next question is, do we have ideas around what the best place to make sure that we get that feedback? So how many people are familiar with GitHub? Quite a few, okay. So GitHub has a couple of different formats in them, and I realize I didn't log in on this, so we'll see if this works. We've been working under, see, I don't see it up here. We've been working under issues, And so we've kind of modeled the issues structure under the same structure that the biological data standards primer is. Is that right? That's where you got it from? Yeah. So the biological data standards is also another cluster in ESIP. They also have a primer that's hosted on the ESIP GitHub. And they have a concept around kind of templates that they've built out. And so we've kind of modeled the templates on that. And then I've gone through and added labels to the issue. So you can, if you open up an issue, you can add a label to it. Like, I think this should be done. It would definitely accelerate the usability of this. The working group should make sure to try to get this done in the next couple of months. Or this is something that could be adopted later on. So maybe a longer term issue that you want to put in, or then like, I've got this really cool idea, it doesn't have to happen immediately, but I want to make sure it gets captured somewhere so it doesn't get forgotten. And so made another cute little QR code. Now the Boulevard taught me how to make these things, like gonna make them for everything. But it should just be under the ESIP Fed, ESIP DMP GitHub. And that's where you can go in and make an issue, and I'm not logged in, so it's not gonna let me. Do you want to, yeah, sure, knock yourself out.
So, I mean, yes, you're gonna do this, but the idea is that you're gonna go to your kind of little icon up here. Go to our GitHub page, or I think it's in the introduction feedback. You can go to our issues page, so there's a hyperlink here, and it will take you to where Alicia was just at. And as you
I didn't resolve my issue.
look at that.
Finished my feedback form.
Yeah, I need to close that. I guess it's,
You do have to log in.
you have to log in, sorry. Can you log in?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not gonna get into this now. Anyways, all right. This is one example of it. There's like 4 templates where it just has prompts, right? It asks you a question of like, is this a best practices, or what do you suggest? Give us a short description of that content, etc. So when you hit new issues, it'll give you a blank issue, or it'll give you kind of like a little bit of a theme of what, is it a typo fix? So we have one of those there. Or is it a content-related issue? Of like, hey, you should really add this section. We really would like to see that. But if it's a typo fix of like, hey, Bolivar, Alicia, that's not how you spell data management. That's also there too. Yeah, I mean,
That happens.
that happens. So yeah, so I guess because we're not signed in, but if you are signed in your GitHub, in your personal computers, you can go ahead and kind of just go through these steps. And if you think, so look at that, Carl Benedict opened something, building an underlying repository here. Look, this was probably a blank issue, and Carl wrote there. Just kind of put his thoughts there. But not everybody has something clear, so there's those kind of prompts to help you provide feedback. And if you think there should be another template, feel free to, I guess, use a blank issue to.
Some of us are bad at following instructions.
Yeah. Do just open an issue, yeah. But yeah, we learned this from kind of the biological data standards cluster, and it seemed to be working for them. And since we're trying to follow more or less the same crowdsourcing of this resource, we figured it would be useful for us. So.
I closed my issue for the record. And there, like, definitely let us know if this is not an easily accessible way to give feedback. And like Bolivar said, we're happy to adjust the templates or just make a blank issue. If the template doesn't work for you, make a blank issue. We won't yell at you. I know somebody was concerned about not doing it. I didn't fill out the issue right, and like it doesn't matter. So we're just going to use the next couple of minutes for people to kind of get used to that, get comfortable with it. We're happy to walk around if people aren't comfortable using GitHub issues, but capture some of the thoughts that you had. Obviously, please submit your Google form so we have that as well. But we kind of wanted to use this time to get your immediate feedback on like, this needs to happen in the next couple of months to make this really useful for the community, or this is a longer term idea, or this is a feature idea that you had. So we'll just finish up the rest of the session with that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to close it out a little bit and say thank you to a few people. Aaron, who was here earlier, helped us set up the GitHub issues. Thanks to the Data Stewardship Committee for lots of great insight and feedback. Thanks to all the DMP providers, especially BecoDemo. Danny and Shannon worked with us quite a bit to make sure we had all the citations correct and stuff. And of course, like a big thanks to this guy here who like actually built the thing as like the best ESIP community fellow ever.